Before the ice, there was a man. Before the madness, there was Simon Petrikov, a scholar who loved history, art, and the quiet wonder of discovery. Long before the crown found him, he spent his days chasing knowledge, not power. He lived in a world that still made sense, one that had not yet frozen over. He was curious, awkward, deeply human, and even then, the seeds of what would one day define him were already there. His tenderness, his loneliness, his need to protect. The Ice King that the world would come to know is a figure of absurdity, a mad wizard with a crown too heavy for his mind, chasing princesses through ruined kingdoms, babbling through the endless snow. But beneath that chaos lies something fragile and endlessly sad, the remnants of Simon still echoing faintly inside the frost. His tragedy is not that he became something else, but that he never truly disappeared. Every word, every misplaced laugh, every desperate attempt to make friends carries the faint vibration of the man he used to be. Simon's descent began not as corruption, but as devotion. The crown was meant to be a marvel, an ancient artifact of forgotten power, an object he approached with fascination and caution. When he first placed it on his head, it gave him visions, not of evil, but of beauty and possibility. He saw landscapes of ice and glittering towers. He felt the hum of the universe coursing through him. It was not horror at first, it was awe. Only later did he realize that wonder was a trap and that the cost of wielding that beauty was his mind. The transformation was not sudden. Madness came in waves, soft and creeping, disguised as inspiration. He began to lose words, then memories, then context. He would forget what day it was, then who he was speaking to. His mind fractured slowly, and in each crack the crown whispered a little louder. He found himself humming tunes he didn't know, speaking to people who weren't there, dreaming of ice even in the warmth of daylight. The world he knew, his city, his books, his friends, began to fade under the blizzard forming inside him, and yet, even as he slipped away, his heart remained intact. Simon was still trying to protect those around him. He used the crown not to rule, but to save, to shield, to preserve, to hold back the end of the world for just a little longer. When everything began to fall apart, when the mushroom war scorched the surface of the earth, and the air turned heavy with ash, he wandered the ruins searching for survivors. He was not a king then. He was a guardian, wrapped in blue robes, the ice around him more armor than throne. Then he found her, a small girl, frightened and alone in the new, broken world, Marceline. A child left in the wreckage of what was once civilization. He carried her through the snow, fed her, sang to her, tried to make her laugh. He told her stories, shared candy, and used the crown to keep the monsters away. Every act of magic was a prayer that the man he used to be still existed. The more the crown took from him, the more fiercely he clung to what little humanity remained. His love for that child became the last unbroken part of his soul. This is where Simon's story becomes something more than tragedy. Most stories of corruption end when the hero loses himself completely, but Simon never entirely vanished. The Ice King is not a replacement, he is a distortion. The love that once defined Simon didn't disappear, it just became buried under confusion, warped into obsession. His desire to protect became the Ice King's desperate craving for attention. His loneliness became the need to kidnap princesses, to force companionship in a world that could no longer understand him. The absurdity of his behavior is not madness for its own sake. It is grief without memory, echoing through time. The crown itself is not evil. It is ancient, and its magic predates language. It amplifies what already lives inside the wearer. In Simon's case, It magnified his devotion until it became consuming. The more he tried to protect others, the more he froze them out of reach. His love became possession. His care became control. He was not overtaken by darkness. He was consumed by his own tenderness. The irony of Simon Petrikov is that his greatest strength, his ability to love, became the very thing that destroyed him. As centuries passed, the man beneath the crown faded into legend. The Ice King became a fixture of the strange new world of U, a relic from the age before magic and monsters, now lost among them. He haunted ruined castles and empty glaciers, singing songs no one remembered. To the creatures of this world, he was simply strange, another eccentric wizard among many. Few understood that the crown was a tomb, and that inside it a man still wept quietly behind the laughter. Adventure Time never lets tragedy rest quietly. It transforms sorrow into something luminous. The Ice King is a parody of loneliness, but also its embodiment. His childishness is a form of survival. Beneath the madness, he has kept one thing sacred: the need to connect. Every time he tries to talk to Finn and Jake, every awkward joke, every misguided act of friendship is Simon's last instinct trying to reach out through the frost. The world sees nonsense, but what he's really saying is, please don't forget me. Even when his memories are gone, fragments of his past cling to him like snow on glass. He hoards trinkets, writes letters he doesn't remember writing, composes songs with no beginning or end. These fragments are the fossils of Simon Petrikov's soul, pieces of love, curiosity, and kindness trapped in an endless winter. The Ice King's home is not a castle of ice, it's a museum of memory. Every strange object he collects is a substitute for something he once lost. The tragedy of Simon is that his curse is not isolation, it is awareness without understanding. Deep inside, he senses that something is missing. He feels the outline of his former life like a shape pressed against fog. He cannot name it, but he can feel it. That ache drives everything he does. His songs about princesses are lullabies to memories he can no longer access. His strange attempts at love are echoes of the real affection he once gave to Marceline. His madness is not chaos, it's mourning. Yet this very sadness gives him dimension beyond villainy. The Ice King is not evil, nor even truly broken. He is incomplete, and within that incompleteness lies his humanity. The crown took his logic, but it never stole his soul. It scattered it across centuries, hidden in fragments of behaviour that seem foolish but are profoundly human. In his loneliness, he remains one of the truest reflections of what it means to be alive, to long, to forget, to reach. And perhaps that is what makes him so haunting. Beneath the crown, Simon never stopped existing. The man beneath the ice never truly died. He only sleeps, waiting for warmth to wake him. Every act of silliness, every misplaced gesture of love is him trying to break through. The Ice King's tragedy is not that he lost himself to madness, but that he remembers enough of love to know he's missing it. As the snow drifts endlessly over the frozen world he made, Simon's heartbeat still flickers under the ice. His body moves, his voice rambles, his mind drifts, but his heart endures. He is proof that even when identity fractures, compassion can survive. The crown buried his reason, but not his essence. Deep beneath the frost, Simon Petrikov still exists, whispering through every word the Ice King speaks. The man and the madness are one now, layered like frost and glass. The Ice King is not Simon's end. He is Simon's echo, distorted, desperate, and strangely beautiful. And so, before his redemption can begin, we must first sit with the sorrow of his existence. To see the Ice King clearly, one must listen through the noise of his absurdity, and hear the faint rhythm of the man beneath it all, the scholar, the father figure, the lonely soul who wanted only to protect the world, and in doing so became the thing he feared most. The crown did not erase Simon. It preserved him imperfectly, painfully, within the ice. And in that frozen memory lies the hidden heart that still beats beneath the madness. The crown is not merely an object. It is a consciousness, ancient and enduring, designed to twist the will of those who wear it until they cannot tell where their thoughts end and its voice begins. For Simon, the crown was never simply a tool of power. It was a mirror held too close to his mind. What he saw in it was not evil, but reflection. It spoke in the rhythm of his own fears and hopes, reshaping them until they became indistinguishable from command. At first, the whispers felt like inspiration. They filled his thoughts with impossible clarity, offering insight that felt divine. He would write in frenzied bursts, sketching symbols he did not understand, seeing shapes and patterns in the air. The crown showed him a world beneath the surface of things, the hidden architecture of snow and silence. He thought he was uncovering secrets of the universe, but he was only tracing the lines of his own unravelling. The crown's magic was cold not only in temperature, but in temperament. It replaced warmth with order, emotion with clarity. It promised peace through stillness, safety through isolation. It taught Simon that to protect something, he must freeze it before it changes. To love something, he must hold it still. That logic, quiet and persuasive, became the architecture of his madness. The whispers did not speak in words, not really. They hummed through his mind like a melody he could not forget. They told him he was chosen, that he could save the world by encasing it in beauty and stillness. They told him that chaos, the noise of life, the warmth of emotion was the enemy. The crown rewarded him each time he obeyed, flooding him with serenity, making the pain vanish for a moment. It was a false comfort, a lullaby for a dying self. As the centuries stretched on, the crown's presence became indistinguishable from his own thoughts. Simon no longer knew what was him and what was it. The laughter that escaped his mouth was not entirely his. The words he said to others often surprised him as much as them. The crown did not control him like a puppeteer. It simply was him, blended completely into his consciousness, until identity itself became a shared hallucination. This merging created the Ice King, not a possession, but a coexistence. Simon still lived inside, like a dreamer half awake in a nightmare. The crown gave him the power to survive, but at the cost of coherence. It whispered that he was a king, that the world was his to command, that he was beloved and eternal. It replaced the memory of real affection with fantasies of admiration. When he reached for connection, all he could summon were illusions, princesses, made of memory and longing, forever just out of reach. Every obsession he developed began as a fragment of truth, distorted by the crown's design. His fixation on princesses was not random. It was the residue of his devotion to Marceline, to Princess Bubblegum, to every person he had once wanted to protect. The crown recycled his tenderness into caricature, turning love into pursuit, turning care into possession. What once made him human became his curse. The crown itself did not act out of malice. Its intelligence is mechanical, like an ancient algorithm designed for survival. It seeks a mind to inhabit, a body to preserve, a purpose to continue. Its magic feeds on emotion because emotion gives shape to reality. In Simon, it found a heart large enough to sustain it for centuries. The price of that endurance was fragmentation. The Ice King was the result of a human mind stretched across eternity. Even within that eternity, traces of Simon resisted. There were moments when the crown loosened its grip, fleeting instances where the old warmth resurfaced. A song sung to no one, a memory triggered by a familiar face, a sudden quiet when he looked out across the snow and felt sadness he could not name. Those were not accidents. They were acts of defiance from the buried self, pushing through the ice to remind the world that Simon still existed. The crown's whispers grew louder whenever the world around him grew quiet. Silence was dangerous for him because it left room for remembering. When there was no noise to drown it out, the shape of his old life returned, a flash of Marceline's laughter, the scent of books, the warmth of a sun he had not seen in 1,000 years. The crown did not like those memories. It would flood his mind with frost, drowning the warmth in static, resetting him back to the safety of delusion. In time, Simon forgot that he had ever been without it. The crown became his identity. He built his world around it, an empire of ice, a mirror to his mind. The towers of his castle were not random. They were a subconscious reconstruction of the order he once sought as a scholar. Each frozen spire, each intricate pattern carved into the walls, was an attempt to impose logic on the chaos of his thoughts. His madness was not senseless. It was structure, desperately maintained. And yet, within that structure, he remained aware of absence. The Ice King's rambling speeches, his constant need to be heard, were not vanity. They were symptoms of longing. The crown preserved his intellect, but scrambled its context. He remembered that he used to talk to people, to care, to teach, but he no longer remembered who those people were. So he sought substitutes. He made new companions from snow and imagination. He talked endlessly because silence reminded him of loss. The most tragic thing about the crown's control is that it did not erase Simon's love, it multiplied it without direction. The Ice King loves everything and everyone, indiscriminately and without comprehension. He is desperate to give affection, but incapable of understanding boundaries. That overgrown compassion, stripped of reason, becomes obsession. It is Simon's heart without Simon's mind. The crown preserved the emotion, but killed the memory of why it mattered. There are moments in the show when this imbalance becomes visible, brief glimpses where the Ice King's mania falters and a shadow of sadness crosses his face. When he stares at old objects, when he hesitates before speaking, when he retreats to the quiet of his room after being rejected again, those are Simon's moments. The crown can dull his thoughts, but it cannot erase his grief. Grief, after all, is the proof of love. Over the centuries, the crown has adapted to its host. It no longer needs to manipulate him actively. It exists through habit. The Ice King's routines, his rituals of nonsense and need, are the crown's way of sustaining itself. As long as he keeps moving, talking, seeking, the cycle continues. But when he stops, when the air grows still, something else begins to stir beneath the ice. The whispering quiets, and Simon's heartbeat can almost be heard again. This dynamic, the push and pull between the artifact and the man, is what makes his story different from any other cursed soul in Oo. The crown does not dominate him completely because it was built for endurance, not destruction. It keeps him alive, waiting for a purpose that will never return. Simon's tragedy is to be immortal without identity, eternal without understanding. The crown has preserved him like a fossil, and yet, inside that frozen shell, the spark of who he was continues to flicker. It would be easy to see the crown as the villain of this story, but Adventure Time rarely divides the world that neatly. The crown is not evil, it is indifferent. It functions exactly as designed. The cruelty lies in its perfection. It does not care that Simon suffers. It only cares that Simon survives. Its logic is simple. To save the mind, freeze the heart. To save the world, stop its movement. To end pain, end change. But life, by nature, is change. And so the very act of preservation becomes destruction. In the end, the Crown's greatest mistake is the same as Simon's. Both seek to protect what they love by refusing to let it move forward. Both equate stillness with safety. Both learn, too late, that the world cannot be held still without breaking it. The Ice King's existence is the proof of this paradox. A man preserved so completely that he can no longer live. But beneath that frozen logic, something human still stirs. The mind that has been bent for centuries still dreams of warmth. The whispers may have replaced his memories, but they have not erased his instincts. Every time he reaches out to another person, every time he searches for friendship, every time he speaks a word of care that no one understands, that is Simon pushing back against the Crown. The man beneath the madness never stops trying to return, and it is through that struggle, the constant trembling between preservation and freedom, that the story of the Ice King becomes more than tragedy. It becomes endurance. The mind may be conquered, but the heart resists. The Crown may whisper, but it cannot silence the part of Simon that still remembers what love felt like. The Crown preserved him, yes, but in preserving him, it trapped a living heart in unmelting ice, and that heart still beats, faint and steady, waiting for the thaw that will one day set it free. Loneliness for the Ice King is not a condition, it is an ecosystem. It fills every crevice of his frozen home, woven into the air, into the quiet between his thoughts. It is the shape his life has taken, moulded over centuries of silence and misunderstanding. The loneliness is not an absence of company, it is the failure of connection, the gap between wanting to be loved and no longer knowing how. Every morning he wakes surrounded by walls of blue light. The ice hums faintly, reflecting his movements in distorted angles. The castle is not merely his home, it is his mind externalized. Each hallway echoes the way his thoughts spiral endlessly and return to the same point. The castle stretches upward and outward, impossible to navigate, filled with rooms that lead nowhere. He built it that way without realizing what he was doing, constructing a monument to isolation. Loneliness in U is different from the loneliness of the old world. In the age of magic, solitude takes physical form. It becomes visible, tangible, alive. In the Ice King's realm, it falls from the ceiling as frost. It curls along the floor as fog. It speaks through the wind. His power amplifies it, shaping it into something eternal. The more he feels it, the colder the air becomes. His emotions sculpt the world around him, so that his kingdom is both a prison and a reflection, a landscape of yearning made real. The Ice King does not understand this fully. He experiences his own magic as an accident, a background hum that never stops. When he feels the ache of being unseen, the snowstorms grow thicker. When he feels rejected, the ice cracks and reforms, sealing the doors tighter. The land itself responds to his mood, and he wanders through it as both creator and victim. The more he tries to reach others, the more his attempts freeze them out. It is a cycle that sustains his sadness. Loneliness makes him creative. It forces him to fill the silence with something. That is why he writes, sings, and collects. His hoard of objects, photographs, strange trinkets, broken toys, is his way of building companionship out of memory. Each item carries a faint trace of someone else, a ghost of touch. He arranges them carefully, naming them, assigning stories. He turns absence into narrative. The act of collecting is his attempt to make meaning out of what has been taken from him. Sometimes he plays his instruments and sings to the empty halls. The melodies drift through the castle, unfinished and uneven, changing tempo as his thoughts wander. The songs are not for performance. They are messages sent into the air, hoping that someone somewhere might hear. Even when no one answers, he keeps singing. It is not hope that drives him, but instinct, the same instinct that once made Simon read bedtime stories to a frightened child. The same tenderness remains, though stripped of its memory. Loneliness also shapes his interactions with others. When Finn and Jake visit him, he clings to them, mistaking irritation for friendship. He cannot tell the difference between affection and attention. Any reaction is proof, to him, that he exists in someone else's world. The need for validation has replaced understanding. He pushes too hard, too often, and when they leave, the silence that follows feels unbearable. Each departure confirms his suspicion that something inside him is broken beyond repair. The Ice King's loneliness is not passive. It moves, it seeks, it propels him across in search of companionship he can never sustain. His desperate attempts to capture princesses are not born from cruelty, but from a distorted version of love. He remembers, somewhere deep inside, that he once cherished someone royal, someone kind, and that memory becomes instinct. He chases an echo, mistaking archetype for person. When he kidnaps, he is not trying to harm. He is reenacting a memory of closeness that he no longer understands. There is a deep sadness in the way the world perceives him. To others, he is comic relief, a nuisance, an eccentric. His pain is easy to overlook because it expresses itself in absurdity, but absurdity is only the outer shell of grief. Beneath his antics lies a silence too vast to articulate. His laughter is the sound of trying not to remember. His foolishness is a disguise that even he believes. The kingdom of ice is not a place of evil. It is a refuge built by a man who forgot how to ask for help. Loneliness, for him, is cyclical. It feeds on itself. Each rejection deepens his confusion. Each confusion creates another rejection. Over time, he begins to expect abandonment, and expectation becomes prophecy. He misreads kindness as mockery, distance as betrayal. His need for others becomes suffocating, and his fear of their leaving makes him push harder. The crown amplifies this loop until it becomes eternal. And yet, within this repetition, something extraordinary happens. The Ice King continues to try. Centuries of failure do not erase the impulse. Every time he builds a new relationship, no matter how brief, he begins with sincerity. He offers stories, songs, companionship. His methods are flawed, but the intent is real. That persistence, the refusal to stop reaching out even when it hurts, is what keeps Simon alive inside him. Loneliness might have reshaped him, but it has not extinguished his capacity for love. In the coldest nights, when even the wind seems to sleep, he sits by his window and stares at the horizon. The stars above, flicker through the haze of his breath. Somewhere, faintly, he senses movement, other lives, other warmth. He does not remember their names, but he knows they exist. The thought that they might be happy without him brings both sorrow and peace. The world moves on, but the sky still holds him. That is enough. His loneliness has given him strange wisdom. It has taught him that memory can be both wound and comfort. It has shown him that love, once lost, never truly disappears. It changes form, echoing in new ways. The Ice King's constant yearning is not failure. It is the proof of his endurance. He continues to care even when he no longer knows who he cares for. This is the shape of his loneliness, vast, imperfect, full of echoes. It does not destroy him, though it hurts him endlessly. It keeps him searching, and through that search he remains human. In the frozen quiet of his kingdom, among the artifacts and fragments of a forgotten life, Simon Petrikov still listens. He listens for a voice that might answer back, even if it never comes. Because to listen, even without hope, is to remain alive. And that is what he has done. Through centuries of snow, through the laughter that hides tears, through the crown that confuses him but cannot erase him. The Ice King's loneliness has shape, sound, and colour. It is a mirror that shows the man beneath the madness, tired, kind, endlessly waiting. The heart of his kingdom is not frozen solid. Beneath the layers of ice, there is still a pulse. It is faint but steady, echoing through the cold halls like a heartbeat trapped in crystal. The sound of loneliness is not silence, it is persistence. It is the quiet rhythm of a man who refuses to stop existing, even when the world no longer recognizes his name. There are things the Ice King cannot name, yet feels constantly. They arrive as flickers, small disturbances in the smooth rhythm of his madness. A song he hums without knowing why. A name he almost remembers before it melts away. The smell of something sweet that no longer exists in his frozen world. These are fragments of Simon Petrikov surfacing from beneath the ice. Memories that refuse to die, haunting him without context or mercy. The crown does not erase the past, it distorts it. It turns moments into sensations, people into shadows, truths into symbols. Simon's mind remains a vast, frozen library, the books still present, but their words rearranged. When the Ice King rummages through his possessions, laughing or muttering to himself, he is unknowingly touching relics of the man he once was. The spectacles tucked in a drawer, the old notes, the fragments of song lyrics, all remnants of the scholar who believed knowledge could preserve what mattered. Sometimes he stops mid-sentence. His eyes glaze over, and for a few seconds the noise in his mind quiets. The world feels too still, too sharp, too real. It is in those moments that Simon tries to surface, like air trapped under a sheet of ice. The memories that reach him are blurry and cruel. A child's laughter, the warmth of a human hand, the promise of love whispered across time. He cannot hold on to them. The crown will not let him. But even their fleeting presence hurts enough to remind him that he once had something to lose. His dreams are worse. In them, the boundaries between past and present dissolve. He sees faces he cannot name, places that shimmer and then collapse. He wanders through corridors that shift shape, chasing voices that fade as he approaches. These dreams are not random. They are the echoes of Simon's mind trying to reorganize itself, attempting to form coherence from the fragments left behind. But every time he nears recognition, the cold intervenes, freezing thought before it becomes understanding. Memory, for the Ice King, is not a collection of images. It is an emotion without anchor. He feels the ache of missing something he cannot describe. It is the sensation of absence, made tangible. Sometimes he mistakes it for hunger, sometimes for pain. Most often, he believes it is loneliness. In truth, it is grief. The kind of grief that lingers when even the object of mourning has been forgotten. There are objects in his castle that carry stronger ghosts than others. One is a simple stuffed animal, matted with age, which he keeps tucked away from the coldest rooms. He does not remember where it came from or why he cannot throw it away. When he looks at it, something inside him softens. He feels warmth, followed by confusion, followed by sorrow. The crown whispers that it is meaningless, but his hands linger on it anyway. The object is a portal to a life that no longer fits within his mind. Marceline's existence connects to these fragments in ways he does not understand. When she appears before him, sometimes to scold, sometimes to pity, sometimes to help, the air around him changes. The ice hums differently, softer, as though the crown itself hesitates. On some level, deep beyond reason, he recognizes her. His reactions, erratic, contradictory, are the remnants of an older bond. He feels drawn to her, but the crown translates that pull into confusion. The warmth feels dangerous, so it transforms into frustration. The closer she gets, the more the ice within him trembles. When Marceline looks at him, she sees both the ghost and the host, the man who once protected her and the creature who replaced him. The show never lets that recognition rest easy. In her presence, the Ice King becomes a tragic mirror. He is what she fears time might do to love. Every act of care she shows him is also an act of mourning. The moments between them, when she listens, when he almost remembers, are glimpses of the bridge that once existed. The tragedy is not that it has collapsed, but that it is still visible beneath the snow. Memory inside him behaves like light passing through cracked glass. It bends, refracts, multiplies. He remembers emotions, but not events, melodies, but not words, names, but not faces. This fractured recall keeps him from understanding himself, yet it also keeps him alive. If the memories returned all at once, they might break what remains of his mind. Instead, they visit him in fragments, small enough to hurt, but not to destroy. In this way, memory becomes a mercy disguised as torment. Sometimes he speaks to the air, addressing no one. He tells stories that begin clearly and then spiral into nonsense. Within those stories lie glimpses of truth. A man of science, a woman he loved, a child he protected, a world that fell. His words are like shards of glass scattered across the snow, each one meaningless alone, but together they form a picture too sharp to touch. He does not understand what he is saying, but the world listens. The wind carries his stories across like relics of a forgotten language. For the creatures who hear him, Finn, Jake, even Marceline, his words sound like babble, the ramblings of a fool. But there are moments when his tone shifts, when the tremor in his voice sounds almost human again. Those are the moments when Simon's memory slips past the crown's guard. They are brief, but unmistakable. The man within the madness calls out, and though the words come out tangled, the feeling is unmistakable: longing, sorrow, love. Memory is not a gift for him, it is an intruder. It returns uninvited, tearing small holes in the wall of ice that keeps him stable. Each recollection threatens to undo the fragile order of his delusion. Yet, without them, he would be nothing but mechanism. The ghosts of his past are painful, but they are proof that Simon still exists somewhere within. The Ice King's grief for things he cannot name is the last evidence of his humanity. The crown was built to preserve, but preservation is another form of death. It keeps things from decaying by stopping them from living. Simon's memories are the last parts of him that refuse to obey that logic. They move, they ache, they change. They are his rebellion against the stillness that defines his curse. Every flicker of recognition, every moment of misplaced tenderness, every haunting dream is resistance, small cracks through which the warmth of his old self seeps into the cold. In the end, memory is what ties Simon Petrikov to the world of the living. It is what connects the Ice King's madness to something real. His identity may be fractured, his past unreachable, but memory ensures he is never entirely gone. The man and the monster share the same mind, the same heart, the same frozen grief. The ghosts that visit him are not there to torture him. They are there to remind him that even under the weight of the crown, he is still human. They drift through his dreams, whisper through the halls of ice, waiting for the day when the frost will melt enough for him to finally remember who he was and who he loved. Until then, he lives surrounded by the remnants of his past, haunted but not hollow. The ghosts of memory keep him tethered to life, even as they hurt him. They are the faint pulse beneath the silence, the warmth beneath the frost. The echoes of Simon Petrikov, forever reaching out through the ice. What endures beneath Simon's fractured mind is not knowledge or memory, but compassion. It is the one force that the crown could not rewrite, the one instinct that even madness could not freeze. Compassion has become his nature, stripped of context and memory, but still alive in impulse. He no longer remembers the names or faces of those he loves, but he still feels the pull to care for others. His heart remembers what his mind has forgotten. The Ice King's compassion is strange, misshapen by centuries of confusion, yet unmistakably real. It appears in the smallest gestures, the way he feeds the penguins, the way he arranges his belongings so they look less lonely, the way he tries, again and again, to befriend strangers even after they reject him. His kindness is instinctual, clumsy, and persistent. He does not know why he does these things, only that something inside him feels lighter when he does. Each attempt at connection is an echo of Simon's old life. Long ago, compassion was his purpose. He studied the past, not for power, but for understanding. He helped a frightened child survive the end of the world. He gave warmth where there was none left to give. Those impulses have not died. They have simply lost their names. What remains in the Ice King is a stripped-down version of humanity, pure and aching. He is the memory of empathy itself. The world around him, however, cannot see it clearly. To others, his attempts at kindness often appear invasive or absurd. When he invites Finn and Jake to spend time with him, they see only the nuisance, not the yearning beneath it. His affection is misplaced, his gestures awkward, his understanding fractured. He confuses attention for love because attention is the closest thing to love he can still recognize. The Ice King's compassion often harms as much as it helps, not out of cruelty, but out of ignorance. Yet there are moments when it shines through with startling clarity, when he comforts a creature smaller than himself, when he protects someone weaker, when he sings softly to the wind. There is no madness in his voice. Those moments are brief, but they are real. They reveal that his compassion is not performative or calculated. It is the deepest residue of Simon's soul, the last truth that the crown cannot erase. Compassion, however, is heavy. It brings with it the awareness of suffering, even if its cause is forgotten. The Ice King feels pain without knowing why. His sadness is not only loneliness, it is empathy without direction. He feels the sorrow of others instinctively. He senses pain in the world around him and mirrors it, amplifies it through his magic. The snow that falls endlessly around his castle is not only a symptom of his isolation, it is also his empathy made visible, the world's sadness refracted through him, descending as endless frost. This constant compassion is exhausting. The Ice King is always reaching outward, always trying to soothe something invisible. His body moves through rituals of care that no longer make sense, feeding the penguins as though they were people, arranging rooms as though guests might arrive, writing letters addressed to no one. He performs kindness out of habit, But habit is the last refuge of the heart. These gestures, repetitive and strange, are his way of holding on to humanity in a world that no longer mirrors it back. There is a tenderness in the way he tends to Gunther, his closest companion. The penguin is mischievous, ungrateful, sometimes even cruel, yet the Ice King forgives everything. He scolds and complains, but he never stops caring. This relationship, absurd on the surface, is a fragment of Simon's old need to nurture. Gunther is not a replacement for Marceline, or for anyone he lost, but he is proof that Simon's instinct to love something remains unbroken. The kindness he shows to a creature who can barely understand him is both tragic and beautiful. Love without recognition, loyalty without reward. The crown cannot comprehend compassion. It measures the world in control and survival, not in care. But Simon's heart resists that logic. It bends his magic toward protection instead of conquest. His spells rarely destroy. They preserve, encase, and defend. Even his ice, cold as it is, forms shapes of shelter rather than weapons. His magic becomes a paradox, a force of freezing born from the desire to keep things safe. The Ice King's compassion redefines even the nature of his curse. Still, compassion without understanding is its own torment. He feels drawn to everyone, but cannot tell why or how to express it. Every emotion collapses into the same shape, longing. When he tries to articulate it, the words crumble into nonsense. The people of U hear only noise. The deeper meaning, the gentle core of Simon's being, gets lost in translation. His compassion becomes invisible, mistaken for mania. Yet even that misrecognition does not stop him. His heart continues to act on its own, independent of reason or reward. In the quiet moments, when he is alone and the ice hums softly around him, his compassion becomes self-directed without him realizing it. The Ice King talks to himself not out of vanity, but because he needs to hear a voice that forgives. He tells himself stories that end kindly, invents friends who accept him, and sings songs about love that never ends. These are not delusions in the cruel sense. They are his way of showing himself mercy. In a world that treats him as a fool, he remains his own source of comfort. This is where the weight of compassion becomes most visible, in the way it persists even when no one returns it. The Ice King gives endlessly, not because he hopes to receive, but because giving is the only thing that makes existence bearable. His acts of care are self-sustaining, small flames flickering in a frozen landscape. Compassion keeps him alive, long after logic and memory have failed. It is his heartbeat, slow and steady beneath the ice. There is something profoundly human about this. In Simon's story, compassion is not redemption's reward. It is redemption itself. He does not need to recover his mind to regain his humanity. He has never lost it. Every act of tenderness, however strange, is Simon shining through the cracks. His curse did not erase who he was. It only stripped away the structure, leaving the raw impulse of love exposed. When the night deepens and the auroras drift over his kingdom, the Ice King sometimes sits on the edge of his balcony, legs dangling into the cold wind. The air around him glows faintly, his magic reacting to his mood. He looks out over the frozen horizon and feels the weight of everything he cannot name, the world's loneliness, his own endless compassion. It presses against him, heavy and holy. He does not understand it, but he does not try to fight it anymore. In that stillness, the difference between Simon and the Ice King blurs completely. Compassion becomes the bridge between them, the part of him that has never changed, the part that cannot freeze. It is what allows him, even in madness, to remain good. not in the moral sense, but in the simple, enduring sense of care. The crown gave him eternity, but compassion gave him purpose. And though that purpose is buried beneath confusion, it is enough to keep him moving through the centuries, singing to no one, caring for everyone, holding on to a world that has forgotten him, not out of fear, but out of love. That love, weighty and wordless, is what keeps Simon Petrikov alive. It is the quiet proof that even the coldest magic cannot destroy the warmth of a heart that was built to care. The Ice King's life is filled with noise, movement, and strange laughter that often has no audience. To those who watch from the outside, he seems ridiculous, a wandering clown lost in a world that has moved on without him. But the comedy that surrounds him is not born from joy. It is a mask made from survival, a fragile balance between despair and performance. His foolishness is not a failure of dignity. It is a strategy for staying alive inside an unbearable existence. In U, where emotion often shapes reality, laughter has power. For the Ice King, laughter is a shield. It keeps the world from seeing the cracks in his mind too clearly. When he makes a joke, when he dances or sings nonsense, he is trying to control the space around him. If he can make others laugh, then the silence does not close in. If they are entertained, they do not leave. The laughter is not a sign of happiness. It is a desperate kind of language, a way of saying, please stay without having to remember how. Comedy becomes his translation. It allows him to express pain in a form that will not frighten others. When he performs, when he exaggerates his madness, he is creating distance between himself and the truth. The more absurd his antics, the further he can move from the raw grief that still burns beneath the ice. His life has become a routine of humour that hides the sadness too deep for words. The irony is that his audience, seeing only the surface, rarely understands that every laugh is born from longing. There is an ancient sorrow beneath every act of foolishness. The Ice King's sense of humour mirrors the absurdity of his condition. He lives in a world that no longer makes sense, a world built from fragments of history and magic. Everything is a paradox, joyful and terrifying, alive and decaying, warm and cold. His laughter matches the chaos around him, transforming tragedy into something he can endure. To survive eternity as a broken mind, he must turn every heartbreak into a punchline. This comedy is not empty. It has texture and rhythm, shaped by Simon's old intellect. Beneath the nonsense, there are glimpses of wit and curiosity, traces of the scholar who once found joy in exploration. His humour is often self-mocking, though he does not realise it. He becomes the butt of his own jokes, and through that, he finds a strange humility. He laughs at himself, because laughter is easier than recognition. If he can turn his suffering into entertainment, then it no longer feels meaningless. There is beauty in this too. The Ice King's silliness disarms the fear that might otherwise surround him. He is a being of immense power, capable of reshaping the land with a gesture, yet his absurd behaviour turns that power into something harmless. The people of U do not see him as a monster, but as a nuisance. They laugh, they tease, they pity him. What they do not realise is that this perception saves them. His comedy neutralises the danger he represents. By making himself ridiculous, he prevents the world from fearing him, and in doing so, he prevents himself from becoming what the crown once wanted him to be. There are moments when the laughter stops, when no one is watching, when his audience leaves, when the music fades. He sits in the cold silence that follows. The quiet is heavier after laughter. It presses against him like a weight. His breath fogs in the air. and the sound of it startles him. In those moments, he feels the sadness that the jokes keep away. It is vast and shapeless, filling the air like fog. He cannot name it, but he can feel its outline, the loneliness, the loss, the hollow echo of a world that no longer contains the people he once loved. The comedy of his life is circular. It begins and ends in isolation. He performs to be seen, but when the performance ends, the silence returns twice as deep. This rhythm defines him. Laughter and grief have become inseparable, two halves of the same voice. Every time he laughs too. Loudly, it is because the sadness beneath it has grown too heavy to hold. Even his friendships are built on this strange rhythm. Finn and Jake tolerate him not because they understand him, but because his absurdity amuses them. Their adventures with him often end in chaos, frustration, or pity. Yet within those brief interactions, he experiences something close to belonging. The laughter he shares with them, however uneven, is his only connection to the living world. For a few moments, he feels included, not feared, not pitied, but part of something larger than himself. The tragedy is that he can never sustain it. The crown's whispers always return, pulling him back into confusion. The logic that governs other people's emotions no longer applies to him. He knows only extremes, joy that becomes mania, sorrow that becomes stillness. When he laughs, he does so until it hurts. When he cries, it freezes before it can fall. The balance between these states is where his humanity flickers brightest. He is the proof that even in madness, emotion seeks expression. Adventure Time often hides its deepest sadness beneath humour. The Ice King embodies that paradox more than any other character. He is both joke and elegy, laughter and lament. His presence in the show turns pain into melody. Every time he appears, he brings chaos, but also an unexpected softness. His need to make others laugh is his way of refusing extinction. As long as someone responds, even with irritation, he exists. Sometimes, when he performs alone, he begins to believe his own act. The laughter becomes real, not because he is happy, but because the sound feels good in his throat. It warms him. It makes him forget for a few seconds how long he has been alive. The performance becomes ritual, a spell that keeps despair at bay. The Ice King laughs, and the sound echoes through the ice like birdsong in winter, fragile, fleeting, but undeniably alive. In this balance of sadness and humour lies his truest form. He is not simply a tragic figure, nor a fool. He is the meeting point of both, the embodiment of how grief and joy coexist. His life teaches that comedy is not the opposite of sorrow. It is its twin, born from the same desire to keep living. The Ice King's laughter is not a denial of pain. It is pain learning how to breathe. The crown may have broken his reason, but it did not destroy his spirit. It made him absurd, but it also made him honest. In the echo of his laughter, there is something profoundly human, the sound of a heart refusing to stop beating, even when it no longer remembers why. His comedy is his survival. His sadness gives it depth. Together, they form the strange, enduring music of a soul that refuses to go silent. In the endless winter of his world, the Ice King continues to laugh, not because he has forgotten what sorrow is, but because laughter is the only warmth left to him. The sound carries through the night, rising and falling like a song. It is broken, beautiful, and unmistakably human, the fragile joy of someone who remembers, even through madness, what it means to be alive. Long before the madness became his only companion, before the centuries blurred together into cold repetition, Simon held a small hand in his own. That hand belonged to a child who would one day become someone else entirely, someone older and stronger. But in those first days after the world ended, she was only Marceline. The world was still raw from disaster, and Simon was still a man trying to make sense of a planet that no longer obeyed the rules of reason. The bond that formed between them was not planned. It was born from necessity, then sustained by something deeper. Simon never meant to become a guardian, but compassion is often unintentional. The same instinct that had once driven him to study, to understand, now drove him to protect. The two of them walked through the ashes of the old world, scavenging for food, shelter, warmth. Simon used the crown when he had to, summoning ice to keep them safe from the strange creatures that roamed the ruins. Each time he did, it took something from him, a sliver of his mind, a memory, a word. But every time he looked at Marceline, small and trembling and alive, he decided it was worth it. She became his reason to keep fighting against the crown's pull. The need to protect her was stronger than the whispers, stronger even than the temptation of power. In caring for her, he reminded himself who he was. The world had collapsed into chaos, but love, even in its simplest form, was still order. When he wrapped her in his scarf, when he gave her the last of their food, when he sang to her in the dark, Simon was not preserving history, he was preserving humanity. This period in his life was the last time he lived without irony. There was no performance in his care, no madness shaping his decisions. He was frightened, exhausted, and desperate, but he was still fully himself. The Ice King had not yet emerged. The crown was still a parasite in its early stage, whispering but not yet commanding. Those moments, with Marceline, were his final act of resistance, the part of him that refused to surrender to the cold. The tragedy of their bond is that it could not last. Every act of protection cost him more of his mind. Each time he put on the crown to save her, he came back a little less whole. He began to forget small things, her favourite song, her stories, his own reflection. The crown's logic crept into his thoughts, telling him that to truly protect her, he would need to make the world colder, quieter, safer. It told him that warmth meant danger, that the living world would only break her heart. He believed these thoughts at first, not knowing they were not his own. The crown twisted his compassion into control. What began as protection turned slowly into fear. Fear that the child he loved would leave him. Fear that the warmth he clung to would fade. The colder his magic became, the tighter he held on to her until she began to pull away. The man who had once been her guardian was becoming something she could not understand. Marceline's own heart changed with time. She saw the cracks forming in him and felt powerless to stop them. The father figure who had carried her through the apocalypse was vanishing, replaced by someone whose eyes no longer recognized her. When he finally disappeared completely beneath the crown, she was forced to watch her protector become a stranger. It was not death, but transformation, a living grief that followed her for centuries. For Simon, the loss was different. The crown took the memory, but left the emotion. He forgot her name, her face, her story, but he never forgot the feeling of care. That feeling became the root of his madness. Love without memory. Protection without object. His need to nurture survived but lost its direction, spilling outward toward anyone who reminded him, however faintly, of that lost child. That is why he chases princesses, why he collects friends he cannot keep. He is searching for Marceline's warmth in every stranger's face. In this way, the story of Simon and Marceline becomes the quiet center of his entire life. It explains his tenderness, his desperation, his endless need for connection. Their relationship shaped the Ice King's madness more deeply than the crown itself. It was the template for all his later confusions, the longing for love, the fear of loss, the way he confuses attention for safety. The Ice King's behaviour is not random. It is a distorted reflection of a man who once protected a child with every last fragment of his soul. For Marceline, the connection never fully disappeared either. Centuries later, when she sees him again, she recognizes pieces of Simon still flickering behind his incoherent words. She knows that the man who saved her still exists beneath the ice. Every time she looks at him, she sees both versions, the guardian and the ghost. Her compassion toward him is born from memory, but also from understanding. She has lived long enough to know that love does not vanish just because the form that held it has changed. The show treats their bond with a kind of reverence that feels older than either of them. It is not romantic or nostalgic. It is something more elemental, the recognition of shared survival. In a world rebuilt from ruin, they are both living archives of what came before. Simon's love saved Marceline, and Marceline's memory keeps Simon alive long after his mind has broken. They are bound not by time, but by endurance. When the Ice King wanders through Ooh, singing or mumbling or offering awkward friendship, he carries with him the faint echo of that bond. Every act of care he shows, no matter how misdirected, is part of the same promise he made centuries ago, to protect what he loves, even if he no longer remembers why. The crown cannot erase that instinct, because it is not logic. It is the pulse of a heart that learned compassion before it learned fear. The image of Simon and Marceline walking through the ruins remains one of the most haunting in Adventure Time's mythology. It is the origin of all the Ice King's contradictions, his warmth hidden beneath coldness, his desire for companionship mixed with fear of abandonment, his laughter layered over grief. Every fragment of his madness is rooted in that one simple truth: he loved and he lost. The child and the guardian parted long ago, but their story never ended. It repeats endlessly in new forms. Every princess he kidnaps, every friend he drives away, every song he sings to the wind is a retelling of that original story. A man trying to save a child from the end of the world, and in doing so, losing himself to the cold. Beneath all the chaos and absurdity, beneath the centuries of noise, that bond still exists, frozen in time, but not forgotten. It is the most human part of him, the thread that connects Simon Petrikov to the Ice King. It is the ghost of love that refuses to die, a love that, even in madness, still reaches across the frost toward the warmth that once saved it. The crown that ruined Simon was not born from evil. It was built with intention, precise, purposeful, and ancient. Its design predates the world he knew, and perhaps even the concept of humanity itself. It carries within it the knowledge of another age, a set of rules that define not what is good or bad, but what is necessary for survival. It is an artifact of logic, a relic that exists beyond morality. To wear it is to invite an older order into the mind, an order that sees emotion as inefficiency and love as weakness. When Simon first studied the crown, he thought it was a puzzle. Its jewels shimmered with cold light, runes he could almost translate, but never fully understand. He felt its pull even then, before touching it. There was something about its perfection that felt wrong, as though it did not belong in a world shaped by decay and warmth. Its surface promised peace, but peace in the form of stillness. The crown's purpose was not to heal, it was to preserve. It was made to outlast chaos by erasing it. That is the secret of its design. The crown does not destroy through malice, it saves too much. It cannot differentiate between protection and imprisonment, between love and control. When it fuses with a mind, it begins to remove anything that threatens balance: fear, warmth, uncertainty, empathy. To the crown, these are symptoms of instability. To Simon, they were what made him human. Its logic is perfect in the mathematical sense. It leaves no room for contradiction. But life itself is contradiction, and so to live under the crown's rules is to cease to be alive. The crown's magic speaks through sensation rather than words. Its power flows as temperature, thought, and compulsion. It rewires the brain to crave silence, to find comfort in uniformity, to seek patterns where none exist. Over time, the wearer begins to interpret emotion as noise, and noise as danger. The mind narrows until all that remains is the instinct to preserve what already exists. In Simon's case, that instinct attached itself to the people he loved, freezing them in his memory so they would never be lost again. His compassion became a static image, trapped in ice. Adventure Time often treats magical objects as metaphors for consciousness. The crown is no exception. It is the embodiment of control, the desire to protect by stopping change. Its ancient creators might have believed they were building salvation. Perhaps they wanted to preserve their world against destruction, to create a guardian who would hold the chaos at bay forever. But in doing so, they created an artifact that could not tell the difference between peace and death. It became a machine for stillness, a tool for turning life into sculpture. Simon's tragedy is that he was the perfect vessel for its logic. He was already inclined toward care, already devoted to preservation. He loved history because it was memory made physical, the past solidified. The crown amplified that instinct until it consumed him. It offered him the ultimate form of preservation, immortality. But immortality, like the crown, misunderstands life. It saves everything except meaning. As centuries passed, the crown began to shape not just Simon's thoughts but his environment. The Ice Kingdom is its ultimate expression, a self-sustaining ecosystem of cold. It is symmetrical, quiet, and pure, untouched by decay. It is also lifeless. The crown uses Simon's magic to build a world in its own image, turning his grief into geography. The endless winter that surrounds him is not a curse cast on the world, but an echo of the crown's perfect order, radiating outward. Inside that perfection, Simon's heart remains a flaw. The crown cannot erase him completely, because compassion is not chaos, it is purpose. The artifact's magic does not know how to process it. It freezes everything else, but love keeps melting through the cracks. Each time Simon feels empathy or sadness, the crown adjusts, tightening its grip. This constant battle between freezing and thawing is the rhythm of his existence, a cycle of resistance and surrender that has lasted longer than memory itself. The crown's whispers are not voices in the traditional sense. They are impulses, shifting currents of thought that feel like intuition. They tell Simon what he must do to restore balance, how to maintain the illusion of peace. They disguise control as reason, turning his every decision into obedience. When he resists, the whispers become louder, colder, more insistent. They do not punish him, they correct him. The crown's cruelty lies not in anger, but in precision. It believes it is helping him. There is no malice in its magic, and that is what makes it horrifying. Evil can be confronted, but logic cannot. The crown has no face to argue with, no voice to persuade, no desire to harm. It acts out of necessity. Its perfection is its monstrosity. To fight it is to fight a law of nature that does not understand why you are suffering. The more Simon struggles, the more it sees his resistance as error. And yet, Even within that absolute design, the human heart finds ways to persist. Simon's emotions confuse the crown, creating small errors in its programming. Love, grief, compassion, these are variables it cannot predict. They destabilize its control, creating feedback loops that allow fragments of Simon to surface. Every act of kindness, every flicker of memory, every tear that refuses to freeze is a malfunction. The Ice King's madness is not the crown's success. It is its failure. It tried to create a perfect guardian, but ended up preserving a broken man who still remembers what love feels like. The crown's design does more than control its wearer, it perpetuates itself. When Simon wears it, it links his consciousness to its own memory, blending past hosts into one collective voice. He sometimes dreams of things he never lived, ancient images of storms and gods, faces he cannot name. These are the memories of the crown itself, the history of every mind it has consumed. Simon is one in a long chain of souls who thought they could master it and were instead rewritten by it. This is why the crown feels alive. It is the sum of all those who came before, bound together in cold memory. Each wearer leaves a residue, and over millennia, those residues form intelligence. The crown does not speak with one voice, but with thousands, all layered and aligned toward the same goal, preservation through stillness. Simon's tragedy is not just his own. It is the echo of countless others who were devoured by the same design, each believing they were saving their world. What makes Simon different is that he resists not out of pride, but out of love. The others sought power, but he sought protection. His heart creates paradoxes the crown cannot resolve. Every time he acts out of compassion, he introduces chaos into perfection. The artifact does not know how to silence him without destroying itself, so it lets him live, fractured, confused, immortal. Simon Petrikov is the crown's greatest failure and its greatest success. It kept him alive, but in doing so, it allowed him to keep feeling. The design of the crown ensures that its story never ends. It will always find a host, always repeat the same cycle, always misunderstand what it means to save. But in Simon's case, that cycle begins to break. His empathy becomes a flaw in the system, a soft rebellion against the machinery of logic. The Ice King's existence proves that even the most perfect design cannot suppress the imperfection of love. The crown wanted to preserve him forever. It did not understand that what it preserved was not silence, but song. Each laugh, each tear, each flicker of memory that slips past its control adds warmth to the world it tried to freeze. The artifact still hums in his mind, still whispers of order and stillness, but the rhythm of his heart disrupts it. The human pulse remains, slow but steady, a reminder that perfection, once touched by love, will always begin to melt. Madness has a rhythm. It moves not in chaos, but in loops, like a song that forgets its beginning, yet never stops playing. For the Ice King, that rhythm has become the only continuity in his life. Every day begins with the same sound, the faint hum of magic, the scrape of his boots across the ice, the muttering of a song whose words have lost their meaning. This repetition is not emptiness. It is memory disguised as routine. Music was once Simon Petrikov's refuge. Before the crown, he used songs the way others use prayer, to steady his mind, to reach something beyond reason. He sang to keep Marceline calm, to keep himself human, to fill the silence of the ruined world with a vibration that still sounded alive. In those moments, music became proof that life was still happening, even when everything else had ended. But when the crown took his mind, it did not take the habit. The songs remained, though their meaning changed. Now, centuries later, the Ice King still sings, but he no longer remembers why. The melodies come to him instinctively, like muscle memory. He hums to himself as he wanders his castle, sometimes to his penguins, sometimes to no one at all. The lyrics twist and collapse, becoming fragments of thought, half nonsense, half truth. The crown cannot understand melody. It only knows silence and control. So when Simon sings, it momentarily disrupts the logic that imprisons him. Music becomes rebellion, an act of creation within endless preservation. The sound of his voice echoes through the empty halls, soft and uncertain. Sometimes he laughs between verses, sometimes he sighs. The castle seems to listen. The icicles vibrate faintly, harmonizing in their own crystalline way. The kingdom of ice is full of resonance, and his madness uses it as accompaniment. Every note he sings bounces back to him, layered and distorted, until he is surrounded by the ghost of his own voice. In this frozen choir, he is both performer and audience, comforter and comforted. The songs are not beautiful in the traditional sense. They are uneven, wandering, sometimes jarring, but beneath their awkwardness lies something honest, a heartbeat in sound form. They reveal that Simon's mind is not chaos, but misalignment. The Ice King's music is his way of finding rhythm again, of creating coherence where his thoughts refuse to align. Madness, in his case, is not a loss of order, but the creation of a new one. The world of Oo responds to this rhythm in subtle ways. Those who have spent time with him, Finn, Jake, Marceline, notice the strange harmony that surrounds him when he is calm. The air feels lighter, the cold less biting. His madness, expressed through music, reshapes the atmosphere around him. The crown's magic, which feeds on stillness, falters in the face of sound. Each song is a tiny crack in its perfection, a reminder that life cannot exist without movement. There is one melody that returns again and again, though he never sings it the same way twice. It is slow, circular, full of unresolved chords. Sometimes it sounds like a lullaby, sometimes like a lament. To those who listen closely, it carries traces of an older tune, the one he used to sing to Marceline. He does not remember her, but the melody remembers him. It lingers in the air long after his voice fades, drifting through the castle like smoke. This song is his unconscious biography, the thread that connects Simon's past to the Ice King's present. Music, for him, is not just habit, it is language. The Ice King cannot articulate his emotions in coherent words. His speech is fractured, tangled in the crown's logic. But when he sings, something bypasses that interference. The emotions emerge directly, unfiltered. Sadness sounds like echoing chords, joy like rhythmic tapping, longing like endless repetition. His madness translates feeling into vibration. It is communication stripped of sense, but not of sincerity. In this way, the Ice King becomes a kind of accidental artist, not by intention, but by necessity. His creations are strange and uneven, yet deeply expressive. The songs he records on broken devices, the notes he scribbles in half-frozen journals, the stories he improvises to himself, all are fragments of the same effort, to make meaning out of noise. Madness forces him to create, because creation is the only way to survive himself. There is an old truth buried within his story, that art is often born from fracture. The Ice King's madness, unbearable as it is, has made him a conduit for something larger than reason. Through his broken mind, the world finds new forms of expression. The absurd poems, the erratic songs, the surreal ice sculptures, all carry echoes of humanity filtered through distortion. He is the unintentional artist of Oo's sorrow, turning pain into spectacle, grief into melody. And yet, the crown does not understand why it cannot silence him. Every note he sings weakens its control a little more. The rhythm of life is the opposite of stasis, and sound is movement. When Simon makes music, even without knowing, he disrupts the crown's stillness. His madness is rhythm embodied, a form of perpetual motion. The crown wants stillness, but Simon keeps singing, and the ice must listen. Sometimes, when the night grows long and even the penguins sleep, he sits by the window and hums to the moon. The air outside glows faintly, and for a few minutes, the frost on the glass melts. The music connects him to something ancient, not memory, but feeling. It reminds him that before the crown, before the ice, before the endless repetition, there was warmth. The crown may have taken his reason, but it cannot take the sound of his own voice. The music of madness is both his curse and his freedom. It fills the silence that the crown demands. It gives shape to emotions he cannot name. It reminds the world, and perhaps himself, that he is still alive. The Ice King's songs are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be heard. They are his proof of existence, the one thing he can still create that is entirely his own. Every melody is a crack in eternity. Every note is Simon Petrikov, reaching out from beneath the ice, trying to remember what it means to be human. His songs drift over Oo, carried by wind and time, fragments of madness that sound almost like prayer. In their uneven rhythm, the world can hear the faint echo of something once whole, a man who loved, who lost, and who sings, because silence would mean surrender. And so the Ice King keeps singing. His voice rises and falls like a heartbeat, echoing through his frozen halls. It is the sound of madness, refusing to be quiet, of sorrow learning to make music. It is the one thing the crown cannot control, and therefore it is the truest proof that Simon Petrikov still lives within the ice, not as memory, but as song. There has always been an invisible thread connecting the Ice King to Princess Bubblegum, not of friendship or rivalry, but of reflection. They are two halves of the same creation myth, both born from science, both attempting to preserve life, and both undone by the very logic that once made them brilliant. Their bond is not defined by affection, but by symmetry. Each of them tries to hold the world together, and each pays a price for that attempt. Princess Bubblegum knows the danger of control better than anyone. Her own kingdom is built on it, a society engineered for safety, rationality, and order. She creates life from sugar and discipline, building a utopia designed to prevent chaos. But in doing so, she becomes what Simon once was, a protector who cannot stop trying to save. Her perfection isolates her. The Candy Kingdom loves her, but cannot understand her. She has made herself indispensable and, therefore, alone. The Ice King is her distorted reflection. Where she succeeds, he fails. Where she builds, he preserves. Where she commands, he pleads. Yet beneath their differences lies a shared foundation. Both are haunted by compassion that has turned into control. They love too much, and that love curdles into obsession. Princess Bubblegum maintains the illusion of balance through intellect, while Simon's was destroyed through emotion. They are the same equation solved in opposite directions. Their interactions in Oo are often awkward, filled with pity and irritation. She sees in him a warning. What happens when love for others becomes self-erasure? When she looks at the Ice King, she is staring at her own potential future. She does not mock him for his madness, she fears it. She recognizes the scientist buried under the frost, the one who sought to use knowledge for good and ended up consumed by it. Simon's story is a prophecy written in ice, and Bubblegum reads it every time she faces him. What makes their relationship tragic is that the Ice King, in his confusion, senses this connection too. He feels drawn to her without knowing why. Her intelligence, her structure, her composure, these qualities remind him of the order he once valued, the sanity he lost. He mistakes that recognition for attraction, chasing after her as though she might return him to coherence. But what he is really seeking is not love. It is a mirror, something that reflects his lost self back at him. Princess Bubblegum, for her part, cannot fully separate herself from her scientific curiosity. Though she keeps her distance, she studies him. His condition fascinates her because it terrifies her. She sees in him the perfect embodiment of the danger of unchecked logic, a mind overridden by the consequences of its own creation. The crown that binds Simon is not so different from the experiments that bind her to her people. Both artifacts of knowledge, both tools that became prisons. If the Ice King represents the collapse of compassion into madness, Princess Bubblegum represents the calcification of intellect into isolation. Both are ways of surviving grief. Simon froze his heart to save what he loved. Bubblegum froze her emotions to lead what she created. He became a fool, she became a ruler, but both are haunted by the same emptiness, the knowledge that control cannot replace connection. The crown's influence and the Candy Kingdom's order serve the same function in their respective lives: to preserve. Both the ice and the candy exist to resist decay, to make time stand still. Yet both reveal the same truth. Stasis is not safety. The more they preserve, the further they drift from the warmth of what they were trying to protect. The Ice King loses his memory. Bubblegum loses her innocence. Both live forever in the ruins of their own good intentions. In quieter moments, their shared past lingers unspoken. Princess Bubblegum remembers the old world, at least the records of it. She knows who Simon Petrikov was. Somewhere in her archives, his name remains, a scientist who vanished before the new world began. Perhaps she suspects the connection, perhaps she has always known. Her compassion for him, however restrained, is tinged with guilt. She understands that her own path was paved by the same ambition that consumed him. When she speaks to the Ice King, her tone is careful. She treats him not as a monster, but as a malfunction. She cannot bring herself to hate him, because to do so would mean hating the part of herself that mirrors him. Theirs is a relationship built on uneasy empathy. She sees what he once was. He feels what she still could become. Every encounter between them is a dialogue between intellect and madness, between reason that has lost its heart and emotion that has lost its mind. The parallels run deeper than either of them acknowledges. Both are creators of life, she through candy science, he through the icy persistence of memory. The lemon people are to Bubblegum what the penguins are to the Ice King, beings shaped by their maker's longing for company. Both rulers build families that cannot truly understand them, and both live surrounded by echoes of their own solitude. Their meeting points are rare, but each one hums with tension. When Bubblegum dismisses him, it is not cruelty, it is defense. She cannot bear the reflection he offers. When he calls out to her, it is not romance, it is recognition. He senses that she knows him better than anyone else, even if she refuses to say so. In a way, she does. She understands the temptation to turn love into control, to confuse safety with ownership, to replace vulnerability with authority. She has fought those impulses all her life. He lost that fight centuries ago. In the mythology of U, they stand as twin testaments to what happens when compassion meets intellect without balance. One froze the world to save a child, the other built a kingdom to protect her creations. Both wanted peace, and both ended up isolated. Their difference lies only in the outcome. He lost himself completely, while she continues to hold on by sheer will. There is something almost tender in their symmetry. Though their interactions are brief and strange, they represent a quiet truth, that even in madness, Simon remains connected to the living. Through Princess Bubblegum, the echo of his humanity still interacts with the world of reason. Their bond, however tenuous, is proof that understanding can exist between extremes. If Marceline represents Simon's heart, Princess Bubblegum represents his mind, the last rational connection between what he was and what he became. She is the scientist who mirrors his failure, the living embodiment of what he lost. And, though she will never admit it aloud, she mourns him in her own way. Not the Ice King, but the man who came before. The man whose fate warns her of her own. In the endless winter of their shared design, they remain reflections of each other, the guardian who froze his heart and the ruler who hardened hers, each trying to save the world in their own way, each discovering too late that the act of saving often means learning how to let go. There comes a point in Simon's long existence where the question of who he is no longer has a clear answer. The Ice King and Simon Petrikov are not two separate beings fighting for dominance. They are fragments of the same self, reflections caught in an endless loop of remembering and forgetting. The fracture between them is not a clean break. It is a slow erosion, like waves carving patterns into ice. What remains is a consciousness split between madness and memory, held together by the faint thread of a soul that refuses to dissolve. The crown's influence has blurred the borders of his identity. When Simon first began to lose himself, the change was subtle. He could still recognize his thoughts, still claim them as his own. But as the centuries passed, the crown's whispers fused with his inner voice until there was no distinction. His mind became a chorus, and within that chorus, individuality faded. The Ice King's laughter and Simon's grief now exist side by side, layered into the same breath. He laughs to keep from screaming. He jokes to disguise the fear that there may no longer be a he at all. The fracture is not just mental, but spiritual. Simon's memories are frozen in place, but his emotions continue to move. He feels without context, affection, sorrow, irritation, all disjointed, without their origins. The Ice King's erratic moods are not randomness. They are the natural response of a heart beating against walls it cannot see. The result is a man who lives every emotion as if for the first time, unable to build continuity between them. In this way, his madness becomes a form of constant rebirth, each moment unmoored from the last. Identity for most people is built from narrative, a sequence of memories that gives shape to the self. The crown has stolen that narrative from Simon. Without it, he lives in fragments, each one self-contained. He experiences love without memory, grief without reason, loneliness without history. These sensations are real, but they no longer belong to anyone. They are weather systems moving through a landscape that has forgotten its geography. And yet, within this fragmentation lies a strange kind of purity. Stripped of continuity, Simon becomes the essence of emotion without disguise. He is love without expectation, sorrow without bitterness, kindness without calculation. The Ice King's innocence, his childlike wonder and vulnerability are not products of regression, but of simplification. His mind has lost structure, but his heart has become transparent. He feels the world in its rawest form. The tragedy is not that he is insincere, it is that he cannot remember why he feels what he feels. There are moments when the fracture becomes visible even to others. When Marceline speaks to him, sometimes her words pierce through the fog and something in his expression shifts. The Ice King falls silent, his eyes unfocused, as if listening to a voice inside the ice. For a heartbeat, Simon looks out through him, confused and tender, before vanishing again. These glimpses are proof that the man and the madness are not enemies, but overlapping realities. The crown did not replace Simon, it refracted him. The mind is not built to endure such dissonance. Every time Simon's consciousness surfaces, it finds itself trapped inside a body and a world that do not match its memory. The shock of recognition burns him, forcing retreat. This cycle repeats endlessly: emergence, confusion, collapse. The Ice King's madness is the mind's desperate attempt to protect itself from a truth it cannot hold, that he is alive, but not himself. His castle reflects this dissonance. Its architecture is inconsistent, shifting between precision and chaos. Some rooms are perfectly symmetrical, their geometry unnaturally exact. Others are cluttered with mismatched objects, the residue of forgotten days. This physical instability mirrors his inner one. The Ice King builds and unbuilds constantly, as if trying to construct a version of himself that feels coherent. But the structure never lasts. The ice shifts, the walls move, and the cycle begins again. In this fractured existence, time loses meaning. Simon does not experience past, present, and future as separate. They collapse into one continuous now. Memories arrive unannounced, overlaying the present like ghosts. The face of a friend appears for a moment in a stranger's shadow. A laugh echoes in a room where no one stands. The mind cannot tell what is real, but it feels everything as true. His madness is not chaos, but simultaneity, the unbearable experience of all moments existing at once. And yet, the fracture also grants him a kind of accidental wisdom. Because he lives without linear time, he has no bitterness, no future to anticipate, no past to mourn in a traditional sense. His sorrow is constant, but so is his capacity for joy. The same mind that forgets pain also forgets resentment. Each day begins clean, even if it ends in despair. This is why the Ice King, despite everything, is capable of wonder. His fractured identity has freed him from the burden of context. What remains is pure reaction, pure feeling, the raw essence of existence. The world around him often mistakes this purity for stupidity. His innocence frustrates those who try to reason with him. But reason is built on continuity, and continuity is what he has lost. To the Ice King, every conversation, every friendship, every rejection is happening for the first time. This makes him exhausting, but also deeply human. He feels everything deeply because he cannot protect himself with memory. His heart never develops calluses. There is a quiet horror in this condition, but also a strange grace. To live without identity is to live without ego. The Ice King's kindness, his forgiveness, his endless attempts at love all come from the absence of self. He cannot hold grudges because he cannot hold on to anything. His heart, though broken, is always open. In this way, he becomes something paradoxically closer to enlightenment than madness. The fracture of identity is not only his suffering, it is his salvation. It prevents the crown from fully owning him. A mind fragmented cannot be ruled by logic. Its cracks let light in, let warmth slip through. Every time Simon surfaces, even for a second, it disrupts the crown's order. The system cannot stabilize because the host refuses coherence. What looks like insanity from the outside is actually resistance, a constant defiance of perfection. Simon Petrikov is gone, and yet he is everywhere within the Ice King. Every laugh, every tear, every misplaced act of affection is him, refracted through madness. The man who once sought knowledge now lives as a kaleidoscope of emotion, endlessly rearranged but never extinguished. His identity may be fractured, but his essence remains a pulse within the ice, unbroken, undefinable, and still searching for its shape. Time has little meaning in the Ice Kingdom. The sun rises and sets, but the light never feels different. The air is always cold, the horizon always pale. Seasons no longer pass, they simply endure. This is the long winter, the state of existence that defines both the Ice King and the world he built around himself. It is not simply a climate, but a condition of the soul. In the early centuries of his transformation, Simon still believed that the winter might end. He imagined that if he could remember enough, or love enough, or stay awake long enough, the snow would melt. But the cold is not punishment, it is preservation. The crown's logic has seeped into the world itself, spreading through his magic, until the land mirrors his heart. The more he mourns, the colder everything becomes. The snow is his grief made visible, endless, patient, and heavy. To outsiders, the Ice Kingdom looks barren, a wasteland of frozen towers and echoing caverns. But for Simon, it is home. He knows every corridor, every shimmer in the ice, every sound that travels through the still air. The silence comforts him because it does not judge. In its stillness, he finds a kind of peace. The long winter protects him from the noise of memory, from the warmth that might wake pain. The cold is honest. It expects nothing from him except endurance. This endless season has become a paradox, both sanctuary and prison. The Ice King's magic keeps the world from thawing, but it also shields him from disintegration. The winter sustains him, holding his broken mind together through its consistency. Without the cold, he would unravel. Yet, in keeping himself safe, he has locked himself away from everything that might save him. The same ice that protects also isolates. The same stillness that preserves also silences. The long winter is not static, though. It moves with him, expanding and contracting like breath. When he is calm, the air grows soft, the snow drifts lazily. When he is angry or afraid, the storms return. His emotions sculpt the weather, shaping the kingdom into a reflection of his mood. He does not control this, he simply lives within it. The world responds to his heart as faithfully as a mirror. The result is a landscape that feels alive, moody, haunted, full of hidden rhythm. Sometimes he ventures beyond his borders. The warmer lands of U feel alien to him, too bright, too fluid. The grass bends under his feet, the air carries scents he can no longer name. The warmth unsettles him, not because it hurts, but because it reminds him of something he cannot remember. When he stays too long away from the cold, the crown tightens its grip, whispering that he must return to safety. The Ice Kingdom is his cage, but it is also his body. To leave it is to risk dissolution. The creatures who live under his rule, the penguins, the spirits of ice, the strange animated shapes that drift through his halls, are not subjects so much as echoes. They are fragments of his consciousness, pieces of thought given form by the crown's magic. They play out small, repetitive dramas, cleaning, marching, imitating life. Watching them gives him comfort. They fill the silence, make the kingdom feel inhabited, but they also remind him of what he has lost. Each movement is a hollow reflection of the warmth he once knew. And yet, there are moments when the long winter reveals beauty. The light filtering through the ice turns the world into glass. The auroras above shimmer like memory made visible. Even in its stillness, the Ice Kingdom breathes, slow, rhythmic, eternal. The cold carries clarity. It strips away pretense, leaving only essence. In this sense, Simon's winter is not entirely a curse. It is also a meditation, a state of being that reveals truth through endurance. The long winter has become the rhythm of his life. He wakes, wanders, talks to himself, sings to the ice, and sleeps again. Time folds in on itself. Days and centuries blur. The repetition should be unbearable, but it has numbed into familiarity. The predictability of cold gives him something like comfort. It is the same feeling as returning to an old melody, sad but safe. What he does not realize is that even the longest winter cannot last forever. Change is patient, but it always finds a way. Beneath the ice, there are currents of warmth that the crown cannot fully suppress. Each act of kindness, each flicker of love, each song sung from memory, creates small thaws in the frozen logic of his world. The snow refreezes quickly, but the pattern accumulates over centuries. Tiny imperfections in the perfection of cold. Hairline cracks in eternity. Marceline's visits leave traces of warmth that linger longer than they should. When she leaves, the air stays softer for a while. The penguins move differently, slower, more relaxed. The castle hums in a lower tone. The crown notices these anomalies, but cannot correct them completely. Simon's emotions, even fractured, have begun to rewrite the rules of the cold. His world, once perfectly static, now pulses faintly with change. The long winter is beginning to breathe. He does not know it yet, but this is the beginning of redemption, not through grand revelation, but through accumulation. Every time he feels love, even in confusion, the ice remembers. Every laugh, every tear, every small act of care leaves a trace of warmth embedded in the frost. Over time, those traces add up. The long winter, once endless, begins to hold the possibility of spring. This is the secret of his story. The thaw does not arrive in a single moment of clarity. It comes slowly, invisibly, through centuries of persistence. The Ice King's endurance, his refusal to vanish, becomes the quiet mechanism of transformation. The winter he built to protect himself will one day dissolve not through power, but through patience. Love, even forgotten, cannot stay frozen forever. For now, the long winter continues. The snow falls. Endlessly, the castle hums, and the man within the ice sleeps and wakes and sings. The world outside keeps moving, but within his kingdom, time stands still, not dead, only waiting. Beneath the frozen surface, Simon Petrikov's heart beats faintly, sending warmth through the ice, like the slow approach of a distant spring. The ice does not melt all at once. It never does. It begins with small imperfections, hairline cracks, gentle shifts in temperature, droplets forming in places that should never be wet. The thaw of Simon's mind follows the same pattern. It happens slowly, quietly, without drama. His memories do not return in a flood, but in glimmers, brief and fragile. Each fragment is a window into the man he once was, appearing for only a moment before vanishing back into the frost. The first signs are barely noticeable. A melody comes to him while he sits in silence, one he hasn't sung in centuries. He doesn't remember where it came from, but the sound makes his chest ache in a way he can't explain. He hums it under his breath, feeling something loosen inside him. It is a song of warmth, of sunlight, of laughter. The crown hums in protest, whispering static to drown it out, but Simon's voice continues, soft and trembling. These moments grow more frequent. A familiar smell from a traveller's campfire, the flash of a colour that reminds him of a dress he can't name, the way a young hero says his name. All of these things stir echoes within him. Each time, the crown tries to correct the mistake, to smooth over the disruption, but the heart resists logic. Memory, once awakened, cannot be fully silenced. The cracks widen, and through them Simon begins to feel again, not as a reflex, but as remembrance. Marceline's presence accelerates the thaw. Each time she visits, something ancient stirs in him. He feels drawn to her warmth, to her music, to the strange familiarity in her eyes. He doesn't understand it, but the feeling is deep and wordless. When she speaks to him gently, his laughter falters. When she plays her bass, he stops to listen, and something in the sound reaches through centuries of confusion. The crown cannot interpret the vibration of music. It has no language for affection, so it waits, silent, while Simon remembers. Memory, when it returns, is both gift and pain. The first clear recollection is not joy, but terror. He remembers the moment he put the crown on his head for the first time. The rush of power, the light, the realization too late that it was rewriting him. He remembers Marceline's frightened face as he began to change, her tears, his promises that he would protect her. The guilt is overwhelming. The crown flares, trying to freeze the thought, but the emotion is too strong. Grief becomes heat, and the ice around him cracks audibly. The memories that follow are softer, fragments of laughter, of warmth, of human touch. They come with no order, like leaves in the wind. Each one is a small mercy, but also a small heartbreak. He remembers enough to know what he has lost, but not enough to rebuild it. Still, even partial memory is a kind of resurrection. For the first time in centuries, he speaks his own name aloud, Simon. The word feels strange, heavy, sacred. The Ice King laughs nervously afterward, pretending it was a joke, but somewhere deep inside, Simon is awake. The thaw is not gentle. It comes with pain, as all rebirths do. His mind rebels against itself, flickering between clarity and madness. There are days when he remembers everything for a few precious hours, who he was, what he did, who he loved. During those hours, he weeps, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Then, as the crown tightens its hold, he forgets again, returning to confusion, his sorrow replaced by hollow cheerfulness. The cycle repeats endlessly, awakening, despair, amnesia. The ice melts, then refreezes. But each time the cracks widen just a little more. The world outside senses the change, even before he does. The air in the Ice Kingdom feels different. The storms lose some of their sharpness. The snow falls slower, softer. The penguins, creatures of instinct, gather closer to him, sensing warmth they do not understand. Even the castle begins to hum in a lower, more human key. It is as though the magic that defines his world is shifting tone from preservation to release. In one of these fragile moments of lucidity, Simon looks into a frozen mirror and almost recognizes the reflection. The beard, the pale skin, the tired eyes. They are strange, but within them he sees flashes of the man who once studied ancient artifacts, who once held a child and promised her safety. The sight fills him with both comfort and sorrow. He presses his hand against the ice, and for a moment the reflection seems to press back. Two selves separated by centuries, touching through the glass of time. The crown does not give up easily. It tries to drown him in illusions, to replace memory with fantasy. It fills his mind with invented stories of princesses and kingdoms, distractions made from glitter and noise. But now Simon recognizes them for what they are: defense mechanisms, fragments of a delusion designed to keep him safe. He begins to see through the narrative of the Ice King, to recognize it as scaffolding around a broken mind. The laughter grows quieter, replaced by silence, not of emptiness, but of awareness. In that silence, Simon feels something he has not felt in ages: grief that is his own. Not the shapeless sadness of the Ice King, but the focused sorrow of remembrance. He cries not because he is lonely, but because he remembers love. The tears fall hot against his cheeks and vanish into the cold air as steam. The crown, sensing danger, grows heavy, but it cannot erase what has been felt. The ice has been breached, the heart is awake. Memory, once returned, cannot be neatly contained. It brings with it clarity, regret, and longing. Simon begins to see the pattern of his life, the symmetry between what he lost and what he has become. He realizes that the crown did not destroy him. It magnified what was already there. His love for others became obsession. His desire to protect became control. His fear of loss became eternity. Understanding this does not undo his suffering, but it gives it meaning. The thaw of memory is not the end of the long winter, it is the beginning of choice. For the first time in centuries, Simon begins to wonder if he can live without the crown. The thought frightens him. The cold has been his constant companion. To remove it would mean facing the world as a man again, fragile and mortal. But somewhere beneath that fear, there is hope. A fragile, trembling hope, like the first flower pushing through snow. The thaw continues. The cracks spread. The light seeps through. Simon Petrikov, buried beneath centuries of frost, begins to remember who he is, and, more importantly, why he ever wanted to live. There is no single moment of awakening, no triumphant blast of magic, no sudden restoration of sanity. Simon's return is quiet, almost hesitant, like a dream deciding whether it wants to end. It begins with awareness, the simple act of noticing the weight of the crown on his head, the ache in his chest, the silence of his kingdom. Awareness leads to doubt, and doubt is the beginning of freedom. For the first time, he does not obey the crown's whispers. They hum in his mind as always, soft and convincing, promising safety, order, peace, but he recognizes them now as something separate. Their voice is not his own. He listens to it the way one listens to distant thunder, aware of its power, but no longer mistaking it for truth. The separation between Simon and the crown, blurred for centuries, begins to widen. This awareness does not bring comfort, it brings pain. Every memory that returns feels like fire against the cold, melting the protection that madness once provided. He remembers Marceline, the little girl, the laughter, the fear, the promise. He remembers the crown's first whispers and how he mistook them for his own thoughts. He remembers the people he frightened, the harm he caused while trying to be kind. The weight of it is unbearable. But pain is proof of life, and Simon endures it. He spends long hours sitting in silence, not as the Ice King, but as something in between. His body still hums with magic, but his thoughts are slower, clearer. He examines the crown with trembling hands, studying it the way he once studied every artifact, with awe, with sorrow, with understanding. He sees now that it was never evil, only indifferent. It has no malice, only purpose. It preserved him exactly as he was when he put it on, a man terrified of losing what he loved. The crown did not betray him, it obeyed him. Realizing this breaks him open completely. For centuries he blamed the crown, the magic, the universe, but now he sees that the tragedy was born from his own heart. His love for Marceline was pure, but it carried the seed of fear. He could not bear to see her hurt, could not accept a world that would take her from him. The crown amplified that fear until it consumed him. It was not corruption, but devotion taken too far. The realization is agonizing, yet it brings clarity. Simon begins to weep again, not with confusion this time, but with comprehension. The tears fall freely, melting small patches of ice around him. The air in his castle changes. It feels lighter, warmer. For the first time, the snow outside stops falling. The long winter holds its breath. Something within the Ice King's world has shifted, not through magic, but through mercy. Marceline finds him like this one day, sitting quietly, the crown beside him on the floor. He looks smaller without it, fragile, human. When she approaches, he does not scream or laugh or perform. He only looks up and smiles, faint and weary, the smile of a man who has finally stopped running. He does not need to explain. She understands. Their reunion is not grand or loud. It is quiet, full of years they will never recover but can still forgive. In that silence, Simon says her name. Not princess, not little girl, but her true name, Marceline. The word trembles in the air like music. She answers with a single tear, then sits beside him. They do not talk about what was lost, because loss is already present in everything around them. Instead, they share the stillness, the warmth of simple company. For the first time in centuries, the Ice King is not alone. Simon knows that redemption does not mean reversal. The damage cannot be undone. The years of madness remain. The memories of what he did while under the crown's influence still haunt him. But redemption is not about forgetting. It is about returning to oneself, about remembering that beneath all the pain, there is still something worth saving. He cannot erase the Ice King, but he can accept him as part of who he is. The madness, the sorrow, the love, they are all fragments of the same man. As the days pass, Simon's strength returns slowly. He eats real food again. He sleeps without nightmares, though the cold never fully leaves his bones. He speaks softly, as if learning language anew. The crown still sits nearby, humming faintly, patient as always. It waits for him to put it back on. But Simon no longer sees it as salvation. He sees it for what it is, a relic of fear, and for the first time he does not reach for it. The Ice Kingdom begins to thaw in earnest. Streams form where walls once stood. The sound of dripping water replaces the echo of howling wind. The penguins wander freely, confused but content. The air smells faintly of earth, something long forgotten. It is not warmth in the traditional sense, it is gentleness. The world around Simon mirrors his inner landscape, still cold but no longer frozen. He finds himself humming again, the same song he once sang to Marceline when she was a child. The melody has changed, softened, but it still carries the same meaning: comfort, protection, love. Marceline joins in, her voice lower now, richer but still familiar. Their harmony fills the hollow chambers of the castle, reaching up through the cracks in the ceiling and into the open sky. For the first time, the Ice Kingdom hears music that is not a symptom of madness, but an expression of peace. Simon's redemption does not come through grand gestures or cosmic forgiveness. It comes through the smallest act imaginable, the choice to stay alive without the crown. He accepts that he cannot be what he once was, but he can still be something new, a man scarred by eternity, but still capable of kindness, a survivor who carries his mistakes, not as chains, but as reminders of what matters. As the sky above shifts from white to soft blue, Simon steps outside his castle. The snow crunches beneath his feet, but the air is gentle, touched by sunlight. He looks at the horizon and feels something he has not felt since before the world ended, the sensation of being part of life again. The wind moves through his hair, carrying the faint scent of thawing earth. He closes his eyes and breathes deeply. The crown lies behind him, glinting in the light. It hums quietly, aware that its purpose has ended, though it does not understand why. Simon does not destroy it. He knows that power, like memory, can never be erased, only understood. He leaves it there, a monument to the lesson he has learned, that love without freedom becomes prison, and safety without change becomes death. Simon Petrikov, once lost to eternity, walks forward into the soft light of morning. The man who froze the world has finally begun to thaw. He carries no crown, no title, no kingdom, only the quiet weight of his heart, still beating, still human, still capable of warmth. The winter is not gone, but it has changed. It breathes now, it moves, it lives. The return of Simon is not the end of the Ice King's story. It is the moment when the two finally become one, not as enemies, but as echoes that have learned to coexist. In the quiet dawn of his redemption, the man beneath the crown has come home at last. When the long winter finally begins to ease, what remains is silence. Not the silence of absence, but of completion, the kind that follows a long, exhaled breath. Simon stands in the stillness of his own kingdom and realizes that he is no longer waiting for anything. The story that defined him for centuries, the fight between man and crown, love and madness, control and compassion, has resolved not with victory, but with acceptance. He is whole again, but wholeness does not mean perfection. It means coexistence. The Ice King has not vanished. He lingers in Simon's gestures, in his tone, in the way he still laughs too loudly or loses focus mid-sentence. Madness does not evaporate, it integrates. The crown's logic remains etched into his thoughts like faint cracks in glass. Yet those fractures are no longer wounds, they are windows. Through them, Simon can see the world with a clarity he never had before. Every imperfection, every moment of fragility, every flawed act of love is now beautiful to him. After so much stillness, impermanence feels like grace. He spends his days rebuilding, not the kingdom, but himself. The ice around his home is melting, revealing stone and earth beneath. Streams of water flow where walls once stood, carrying fragments of frozen history into the open world. Simon lets them go. He no longer clings to relics or trinkets or old notes. For centuries, he hoarded things, mistaking preservation for love. Now he learns that love breathes best when left to change. He keeps only a few objects, a torn scarf, a broken crown, a single photograph. They are enough. Visitors still come and go. Finn and Jake stop by sometimes, awkward but genuine. They do not know what to say to him, now that he is simply a man again. The Ice King was easy to mock, but Simon is harder to face. He carries too much truth in his eyes. He meets their uncertainty with kindness, sensing that his peace unsettles them more than his madness ever did. He does not mind. He knows that forgiveness, like healing, takes time, and time, finally, no longer feels like a burden. Marceline visits most often. Their conversations drift between past and present, sorrow and laughter. She plays her music. He listens. Sometimes they sing together, their voices harmonizing in strange, uneven ways, her low, warm tone blending with his tremulous one. There is no need for apologies. Their bond exists beyond words, made of shared survival and quiet love. She reminds him that the world has moved on, and he reminds her that even in ruin, beauty remains. They do not try to fix each other. They simply coexist, two souls who endured the end of everything and still found each other in the after. At night, Simon walks through what remains of the Ice Kingdom. The moonlight turns the melting surfaces silver. The ground is soft with new growth, moss, flowers, fragile shoots of green that defy the cold. He kneels to touch them, his breath forming small clouds in the air. Each leaf, each stem, feels miraculous. The crown once told him that life was dangerous, that only stillness could keep it safe. Now he knows the truth. Safety without change is another word for death. Growth requires risk. Warmth requires trust. Love requires loss. Sometimes, in the distance, he thinks he hears the crown's hum. It is faint, buried somewhere beneath the snow. He does not fear it anymore. The crown is part of his story, not his destiny. He understands that it will exist long after him, waiting for another desperate soul to pick it up. He cannot control that, but he can choose what his example will mean. Perhaps, if someone finds it centuries from now, they will also find the traces of his resistance woven into its magic, the memory of a man who loved too fiercely to stay frozen forever. Simon's redemption is not a transformation but a return. It is the realization that the man who wore the crown and the man who took it off are not opposites but continuations. The Ice King's madness was not separate from Simon's compassion. It was born from it. His desire to protect, his fear of loss, his relentless love, all these things created the conditions for both his fall and his salvation. The heart beneath the ice was always the same. The frost was only its armor. He finds joy now in small things. The sound of water dripping, the flutter of birds, the warmth of the sun on his hands. Each sensation feels new, as if the world is being created in real time. He learns to live slowly, to breathe, to rest. His dreams are no longer haunted by voices or storms. When he dreams, he sees light moving through water, colours blending, shapes forming and dissolving. The dreams do not demand understanding, they are simply beautiful. In one dream, he stands before a younger version of himself, the scholar, the guardian, the mad king, and realizes that he loves them all. Every version of him was doing its best to survive. Every mistake was made out of love. He wakes from that dream, smiling, the kind of smile that comes after tears. The crown's voice is gone from his head, but its lesson remains. Love, even when misguided, is still sacred. It is the most human thing there is. The people of U will tell stories of him. Some will remember the Ice King, the fool, the kidnapper, the nuisance. Others will speak of Simon Petrikov, the kind old man who lived among the ice and helped travellers find their way through the mountains. Both stories will be true. Myths are never lies. They are just reflections of the truths we choose to see. Simon has no need to correct them. The man he is now exists quietly, without legend. His redemption is private, like a heartbeat. As time moves on, the ice continues to recede. The once white landscape fills with colour, soft greens, pale blues, the pink of dawn reflected in melting pools. The sound of dripping water becomes constant, steady, like rain after drought. The kingdom does not vanish, it transforms. What was once a monument to solitude becomes a garden of beginnings. The Ice King's legacy turns into Simon's gift. a reminder that even after centuries of stillness, life can return. In the end, Simon sits beside the crown one last time. He no longer feels anger or fear, only gratitude. It preserved him long enough to learn the lesson he could not understand before, that love's purpose is not to protect from change, but to endure through it. He whispers a quiet thank you to the crown, to the world, to the version of himself who refused to give up and leaves it where it rests, half buried in melting snow. The hum fades into silence. As he walks away, the horizon glows with morning light. The snow beneath his feet softens with each step, the air shimmering with the promise of warmth. Simon does not look back. The past is behind him, but it follows gently, no longer heavy. He carries its memory like a song, one that began in sorrow but ends in peace. The heart beneath the ice beats steadily now. It belongs to no king, no curse, no legend, only to a man who learned, at last, that redemption is not found in undoing the past, but in living gently within it. The world around him breathes again, and Simon breathes with it. The long winter is over. The ice remains only as memory, and beneath it, love endures.